Welcome to the Story of Money by Ash Stewart. Episode 008. Understanding the Intricacies of Debt. Is debt inevitable? Can we avoid it? Can we master it? In the previous episode, we discussed the concept of interest, the cost of lending money. I also made this huge claim that much of the modern economic engine and elements of our prosperity hinges on the core concept. Let me add some flesh to the bones, getting into a very closely related concept: debt. I don't think it's even necessary for me to give a formal definition for the concept of debt. We sort of know it instinctively. Certainly, I may safely assume, more so than, say, interest rates or capital expenditure. Going back to the fictional story of the previous episode, when Bryan lent Steve 100 silver coins, or conversely, when Steve borrowed that sum from Bryan, Steve went into debt. Formally, he became a debtor and Bryan the creditor. But I'll come to the nuances of credit itself another time. A quick note. At this stage of the series, I want to focus mainly on the conceptual aspects of each topic, coming back to a greater focus on the socio-political and similar elements later. But debt is one of things where this seems harder to ensure. So, let's touch briefly on the psychological and social dynamic that our fictional friends are in, having gotten into the arrangement in the previous episode. And yes, it'll help to read that story once at this point. Steve now obviously carries the burden of debt. Brenda and Irene, who suggested that the lending-borrowing take place, might also have a sense of responsibility. What if Steve doesn't pay back, or soon enough? And of course, Bryan is the most emotionally invested in the outcome, because it's his money, after all. As you owe, so shall you. Let's now take a brief look at how the notion of debt and its connotations are deeply ingrained in the language we use. The German word for debt is Schuld, which is cognate with English shall, should. But guess what? That word also means fault, blame, and guilt. Also consider owe and ought. But again, note that owe is also connected with own. What does that say? Or the Latin word debitum. The source of our word is connected to debilis, weak, as in debility. But despite all these somber connotations, debt has a significant economic utility. Connecting the debts. In episode 005, we discussed one of the most fundamental ideas in economics, resource management, which normally goes under the name of capitalism. And then in episode 006, we looked at risk management. These last three episodes, in summary, build up to this one in a fundamental way, because all productive activity in human society involves the question of resource and risk management, both of which use money as a unit of measure, and thus as a core enabling instrument in all such management. And this is where debt comes in, because as I've said in the previous piece, at any time there's someone with a deficit of money, ultimately the resources/capital they need, and someone else has a surplus of it, and it helps that it can be transferred temporarily from one party to the other to enable productive activity. This is what I was referring to when I concluded my previous piece with my claim, linking such activity to much of modern prosperity. Home truths. Let's take an example closer to home, or rather at home. Most of us do not earn enough to be able to walk up to a building society, dump a suitcase of cash or equivalent, and walk out with a brand new house in your name. I know we all wish we could, but a more viable option perhaps is building castles in the air. It thus goes without saying that, whether we like it or not, without debt, we wouldn't stand a chance of looking like that happy couple on the mortgage billboards, all smiling next to a shiny new house. I'm not trivializing the matter, though, but I hope we are now at least a bit closer to answering the questions I posed earlier. Is debt inevitable? Can we avoid it? Can we master it? Well, at least the first two. Debt is a necessary instrument of the economic engine, not just for individuals, but businesses and even governments. Anybody hold a government bond? At least one may hope it's some solace that it's not just us mortals, but even the largest of our institutions that have to think about debt, even if the scale and dynamics are slightly different. More on this later. Also to come, related concepts such as creditworthiness, collateral, mortgages, refinancing, and more. As for the last question, can we master it? Yes, there is hope, but as I just hinted, it involves a lot more than just the plain concept of debt. And these are the sort of questions I intend to address in this series on the story of money. So do stick around.